This is the Education Gadfly Show.
Welcome to the Education Gadfly Show. I'm Stephanie Disler, here to kick things off for this week's episode. Today, Mike talks about education finance during uncertain times with Jonathan Travers, President and Managing Partner of Consulting for ERS. Then, on the Research Minute, Adam Tyner shares a new report from the National Council on Teacher Quality, looking at district policies on pay bumps for teachers with master's degrees and how the money could be better spent. All this and more on the Education Gadfly Show, starting now.
Hello, this is your host, Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, here at the Education Gadfly Show and online at fordhaminstitute.org. And now, please join me in welcoming this week's special guest, Jonathan Travers. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
It's Mike, good to see you.
Yeah, Jonathan is President and Managing Partner of Consulting at ERS. We are going to talk a little bit about what that great organization does with school districts across the country. You know that Jonathan previously served as Vice President of Finance and Administration at Teach for America and was the Budget Director for DC Public Schools. And as you may then put together, based on his background, he is an expert in all things education, finance, and we're going to talk today about some of the financial challenges that schools around the country are facing. Before I do that, Jonathan, you still have a connection to DC Public Schools at all? This is back to school week for those of us in the DMV, the DC area.
Yeah, through some friends and family over time, but we're not doing work there directly.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Fair enough. My kids are back in Montgomery County Public Schools this week. So, gosh, the pace just feels like it is suddenly accelerated. You know, I don't know. I was thinking about how things have changed as a parent, I'm sure, for being, you know, a public school parent over the years, things that we take for granted. One thing is I get like 1 million emails a day now from the school system and text messages. And I always feel like I can't figure out how to I don't want to turn them off. I want to get them, but I don't want to get them like 3 times. And I'm pretty sure if I try to turn any of them off, they're all going to disappear. So I just get them all and feel very well informed about what's going on in our local public school.
Yeah, system's working.
The system it's working. Yes. I guess too much is better than too little. All right. Well, Jonathan, right now, this is a time around the country when a lot of districts are worried about their budgets. They're having a hard time planning. Let's talk about that on Ed Reform Update. Now, I have learned, Jonathan, over the years, not to pretend that I'm an economist. I feel like there was, and just in the last few years, I was very certain that there was going to be a recession after the pandemic. And so I remember writing things talking about, we got to get ready for this bad recession. Didn't happen, right? And then on quote Liberation Day, when Donald Trump announced his tariffs, same thing. I was like, well, this is what people should really be paying attention to, as much as anything coming out of the Department of Education. This is going to tank the economy and send us into a recession, and that's going to have a big impact on our schools. And here we are. I mean, little signs of some trouble, but certainly no recession yet. So I'm not going to predict a recession coming. Who knows? I guess the old line is that economists have predicted 12 of the last 7 recessions or something like that. So I guess they're not good at it either. But it does seem like we have a complicated picture out there right now. Of course, you've got the federal chaos that is hard to track, though the feds don't provide a ton of the money, especially beyond the formula grants, which keep flowing. You do have this murky picture in terms of state budgets. You've got enrollment declines in lots of places, but you also have housing values that are way up, which sometimes boost property taxes. So make sense of this. If you're a budget director at a big city school system, are these the best of times or are they the worst of times?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. and that's the challenge. Mm-hmm. That I, like you, several months ago was thinking, okay, tariffs, recession, what do we got to do? And I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. And then, somehow that's dissipated. And then we've had the big, beautiful bill emerge. And I think in that it seems as though there's a significant amount for many states of federal spending, particularly around Medicaid, being shifted to state responsibility. And so the question there is, are there now going to be, not so much some in FY27, probably more FY28, are there going to be more things competing for state revenue than there were previously? So I think it is both of those things. It is, well, if we think that recession may be coming, that a reduction in what we see first, by the way, we looked at Great Recession to say, okay, are there lessons from Great Recession that we can apply to potential future? And the aspects of education funding that were most affected were state, not local, actually very little impact on local, because then local's property tax. It's really the state income and sales that drive the volatility. So can we look at that and can we infer what might happen if there were a recession? So we see that. You were right to name, let's get a little bit deeper into enrollment decline. Is that going to have a revenue impact? Is that going to have a cost structure impact? And then a little bit on the federal side, I think we're looking at, seems like, level funding, or that neighborhood on the formula side, and then maybe some reductions. As you said, it's not a huge amount of money overall. It is more in some states than others, and so we've got to be careful. I think we've got to be thoughtful about understanding. Am I in Connecticut? Am I in Mississippi?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so let's talk about the federal piece first. Tell me if this seems right. I mean, because of this interplay we see between the administration and Congress, and of course the courts in some ways playing referee, it doesn't seem like Congress is interested in cutting education funding. So for all the noise coming out of the administration about cutting the Department of Education, and in some cases cutting grants, it seems like Congress wants the money to be spent, and that, we'll see, but probably the courts are going to say, look, you got to spend appropriated money. But you brought up Medicaid, and that's key because a lot of school systems get a lot of money from Medicaid directly for kids with disabilities and some of their services, right? And Medicaid is typically like the second biggest line item in a state budget, right? If you put K-12 and higher ed together as one line item and then Medicaid. So you say this competition. So help us on that, on the Medicaid. I mean, is it the way that the one big beautiful bill ended up? My understanding was some of the cuts that might have hit schools directly got taken out, in some cases by the parliamentarian or others, that it's more this concern about the states shifting some of their priorities, backfilling Medicaid. Is that true, or are there going to be some direct cuts that are going to hit school systems too?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of clarity on the direct cut piece. We're talking in a large city district, that Medicaid direct reimbursement is going to be 0.5%, is sort of in that range. And so, if you lose a quarter of that, the pretty significant reduction, you're still talking about in the range of 0.1%, that neighborhood.
All right.
The part of it that if as I'm talking to CFOs and budget directors, that I think we're trying to better understand is the competition for state revenue. Mm-hmm. Are there now going to be more, there's a fixed pie. Are there going to be more slices that need to get cut from that state revenue pie? And do we as K-12, do we need to be preparing for a smaller slice just because there's more of them that have to go around?
Gotcha. That's right. And that's because the Republicans in the One Big Beautiful Bill are trying to say, hey, we're going to step back from some of the Medicaid expansion that happened under Obamacare for people above the poverty line, or we're at least going to have these work requirements that most experts think people are going to struggle to be able to do, or there's going to be paperwork issues. And then the states might say, well, we don't want our people losing that Medicaid coverage. So we're going to step up and pay more ourselves. There's also complicated stuff with the tax reimbursements, and and again, this is going to play out differently in different states, right? It may be that maybe in the blue states they want to be more generous around providing health care, and so that's going to be more of a competition than maybe in some other states.
Right. And I think the point of it is not that you and I or anyone can on the last week in August get to a single number that folks need to plan for. I think the point of it is that there is, I've been studying budget cycles for a long time now. I think we're going to come into FY27 planning, so 26-27 school year. I think we're going to come into that year with as wide a range of possible revenue outcomes as I've experienced. I mean, even maybe, comparable to COVID times. And the kinds of decision making, the ways in which we as system leaders and need to engage public, need to engage board, need to engage appropriators in understanding what decisions do we make over the course of the planning cycle. It's going to be really challenging. There's a premium on certainty. And I think we're going to be in a highly uncertain cycle, both in terms of magnitude and for how long that uncertainty is going to extend into the planning cycle.
Yeah, and that, especially as you keep saying, it's the state money where the big question mark is. I mean, federal, again, maybe around the edges, but the state money, the local property taxes sounds like something that tends to be more stable. You don't see big swings as much. I guess that's true even back when the housing market crashed, or it takes a little while for that to show up. So those you can bank on. I used to think that I figured, oh, well, those big city school systems, they must be getting most of their money from the states because they're so poor. And yet in some places like in Ohio, some of those big urban districts actually have quite a bit of property wealth. So they do get a lot of their money locally versus state. But again, this is an area where I imagine it depends on the district. That if you're a district that does have to rely quite a bit on state funding, you're more concerned than if you're a district that's, got a lot of property wealth where the commercial and residential property values have been going up lately.
Or if you're in a state where a lot of the property wealth is factored into the state's distribution of state revenue. And so there's a redistribution that state is doing. So even though your local revenue may be quite stable, the state revenue is going to be that much more volatile because it's stable.
Yeah, gotcha. So let me ask you this, Jonathan. For those of us that are not in these districts, but would like for them to make decisions that at least we think would be putting kids first. So for example, when it comes to these tough decisions around school closures because of enrollment declines, to try to do it faster rather than to, delay, to try to, as much as possible, keep the best schools open so that kids can benefit from them. I would say another big thing is with their budgeting to really try to prioritize paying teachers well, especially in the highest need schools. And to try to draw the talent to those places where it's needed most, the kinds of things that DC did with Impact and other stuff. What can reformers outside, advocates, agitators, is there anything we can do to make that kind of thing more likely, to provide political cover to the big city school systems to try to make those decisions that put kids first?
Yeah. There's, the phrase that people throw around of never waste a good crisis. I don't know. That feels not exactly offensive, but it feels a little tone deaf. Mm-hmm. I think what resonates for me is what is the imperative that uncertain or perilous times creates, and how do you optimize resource allocation in that time? I think, we talk about it here, so we talk about these legacy cost structures. So there are aspects of resource allocation that happen in large and small systems. So let's go with large systems that happen because, not so much because we were making strategic choices to invest in a certain way, but as a consequence of other things that have happened over time, either just history or policy or just a variety of factors.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that I think are often very politically intransigent. Like they have stakeholders that are deeply invested in them, and they are the thing that is enabling the system to do what it is doing. And they're not necessarily directly connected to research. One would have a very hard time trying to get a positive ROI from them, and so on. And so I do think that this is an important moment for folks like yourself, for folks, as you said, reform community, to look closely at those legacy cost structures and say, really, what is the trade-off? Like, what really are the trade-offs associated with continuing to invest in this way, given how much pressure we have, either financial pressure or just pressure to do right by the students that we're serving, which is actually our mission.
Right.
And
Right.
I think school portfolio is a really good illustration of one of those structures. The reason why we're spending money each year on the schools that we have is because that's the schools that we have, not because we're making a deliberate choice to have that be the configuration of schools. We've looked at, just to go a little bit deeper into that, we've looked at efforts around right-sizing school portfolios across the country, going back last 10 years. This is something that people are really reluctant to do because it is so contentious for honestly, for good reason.
Yeah.
There are 3 districts that we felt like, large districts that we felt like actually made a big move and followed through on it. Jefferson County, Colorado, Hartford, Connecticut, San Antonio, Texas. One thing that all 3 had in common is that they did not enter into the portfolio consolidation conversation from the place of we need to save money. Instead, they went into it genuinely as, what are we trying to have students experience in our schools? And in what ways is the configuration of the school enabling that? In which ways is it getting in the way of that? Mm-hmm. And so by making it about student experience, in those districts, it actually opened up probably conversations and ultimately decisions that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise have.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And those are great ones to look at. Jefferson County, Colorado, Hartford, you said, in San Antonio, Texas. And, and I think about, okay, what else might we be talking about? I mean, I think about, say, pay raises based on master's degrees. Now, if you went at that and said, okay, we're just going to get rid of all of the supplements based on master's degrees, teachers will say, well, that's unfair. You told me that's the system. I got my master's degree, right? And you say, well, we just got to save money, right? If instead you're saying, hey, we really want a new pay system, we want it to be actually more generous in the end, where almost everybody gets paid more. We wanted to really push on especially higher salaries in our highest need schools. Here's what we're going to think about. So it's interesting. I mean, on the one hand, the crisis, which is sometimes about money, presents the opportunity. But if it's only about money, you're making the politics that much harder.
Agreed. Our perspective is, I think that we wish we had an ability to pay teachers more than we are, and that there was a wider set of adult roles within teaching, within instruction, than there is. That systems enabled schools to be able to have much more variation in the roles that individuals played, and that compensation was mapped to those differentiated roles.
All right, Jonathan, this is super helpful. Thank you so much. I promised at the beginning to talk about ERS, and then I forgot to ask you about that. So just say a word about what you all do there, so people can learn more if they go to your website.
Yeah. So I say that we operate at the intersection of resource allocation and systems strategy, organizational design. We are informing the field by writing a bunch of stuff from time to time. We're also working with districts and states directly. Our big question is, how do we allocate and use limited resources to serve students in the ways that we think are most likely to result in the outcomes we aspire for? What do we know from research? What do we know from experience of how we need to organize people, time, and money, our resources, to serve students effectively.
All right, great. Thank you, Jonathan. Again, Jonathan Travers, President and Managing Partner of Consulting at ERS. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks again, Mike. Good to see you.
All right, now it's time for everyone's favorite Adams Research Minute. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back.
I already mentioned it's back to school time, at least for my kids here in Montgomery County, Maryland. But more importantly, it is back to college football time, Adam. The season starts in earnest this coming weekend, and I noticed a game on the calendar this year, Oklahoma versus Michigan. I mean, I feel like we're going to have to put some money on this.
Maybe you want to come down to Norman? We can go.
I'm actually a little bit tempted. Maybe I'll need to. No, it sounds like it should be a good game. I think I see Michigan is number 14, Oklahoma number 18 right now. So
yeah, we'll see those preseason rankings. I never know how seriously to take them, but yeah, it's pretty exciting. When's the last time we played each other? I can't remember.
I don't know. Somebody out there probably knows. I don't know. Maybe in some bowl game sometime. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's been a while. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. Well, I am excited. I'll admit it. I've missed football season, and I have the trifecta now because, now that Washington has a good NFL team again, that's fun to root for our NFL team. Of course, I love my Michigan Wolverines, and of course, there's the Walt Whitman Vikings high school as well, which, by the way, people say Whitman's going to be pretty good this year. We'll find out.
What position does your boy play?
He is on the offensive line. He is still an undersized lineman. And yeah,
that's a hard position. I played that position for a few weeks in 6th grade before I dropped off the football team. Pulling guards and all this stuff. It's actually like more complicated than people think it is. And it have the glory of being like a linebacker and getting to demolish somebody,
And, most importantly, being on the line, you don't get as hurt usually because there's not as much motion. They're just kind of wrestling each other at the line rather than running fast and having hits. The other big news is that my 9th grader who is getting ready to play JV football under pressure from his, or I shouldn't say under pressure, with the encouragement, the persuasion of his older brother, broke a finger at practice the other day. So he's out for 6 weeks. And
Bummer.
For me, I'm like, hey, that is 6 weeks that I don't have to worry about him getting a concussion. So, silver linings. All right, that's enough. This is not the football podcast. This is the Research Minute.
It might be for the next few months, though. We'll see how that game in a couple weeks goes.
All right, what do you got for us on the education research front?
Well, today we are looking at a feature of American teacher pay that is honestly kind of weird. What I'm talking about is the master's degree premium. A little background. Many school districts around the country offer automatic pay bumps for teachers who hold a master's degree.
And by the way, Jonathan and I just talked about this. Absolutely, right?
I wasn't privy to that, so you'll jump in and let me know how this ties in with your conversation there. But the policy sounds pretty reasonable. It's like, rewarding teachers who invest in their own education. It makes sense. But the problem is that decades of research show that on average, teachers with a master's degree are no more effective than teachers without one, with a few exceptions. And according to that research, earning a master's degree while you're already teaching doesn't make you any better either. Lots of studies have shown this, including that great paper by Lucy Sorensen and Helen Ladd a few years ago, and many others. This new study is from NCTQ's Catherine Bowser, and it draws on NCTQ's own teacher contract database, which compiles contract language and compensation schedules from 148 of the nation's largest school districts over the period from 2018 to 2025. That's a data set that captures districts whether or not there's a collective bargaining agreement in place. The report is called The Degree Dilemma, and it leverages that NCTQ database to examine these master's degree pay bumps by comparing across districts and over time to measure the size of the premiums, how they've changed, and what those premiums cost in constant dollars. She also does some back of the envelope calculations to estimate how much districts are spending in aggregate and what that spending could buy if it were redirected to other strategies. So this new paper is a comprehensive, descriptive analysis to examine the trade-offs around paying teachers more for graduate degrees. What she finds is that despite the research showing that paying teachers more for a master's degree does not improve teacher quality, almost every big district still pays more for master's degrees. Of the 148 districts that she studied, 135 of them offered that premium. On average, a brand new teacher with a master's degree gets about $3,500 more than one with just a bachelor's. For a veteran teacher with 25 years in, the premium is more than $9,000. And those numbers haven't changed much during the study period, which starts before the pandemic, as I said. At the state level, 15 states require districts to offer higher salaries to teachers with master's degrees, and those states are mostly in the South and Midwest. She gives some specific district examples that I thought were really helpful for wrapping your mind around this kind of abstract issue. Consider, for example, Santa Ana, California. That's in Southern California near LA. That district caps bachelor's level teachers at step 7 on their district salary schedule, while teachers with a master's can keep climbing the ladder. The result is that by year 25, a master's degree holder makes more than $60,000 per year extra compared to a colleague with the same classroom experience but no advanced degree. The district spends nearly $40 million a year just on those premiums. That's about $1,000 per student. And remember, all of this spending is on something that copious research says does not improve student outcomes. Worse, the report points out that it can actually work against equity because advanced degrees are expensive and financial aid for graduate study has become more limited. The system can make it harder for teachers from less affluent backgrounds to enter or stay in the profession. The report says that districts should break out of these rigid spending patterns and use their money more strategically. There are plenty of alternatives with stronger evidence, paying teachers extra in hard-to-staff subjects like STEM or special education, offering bonuses for working in high-need schools, raising salaries for novice teachers to make the profession more attractive up front, or creating leadership roles where excellent teachers mentor others. Now, there are some districts that have eliminated master's premiums, like Charlotte-Mecklenburg in North Carolina. And some of those districts have reinvested the saved dollars in exactly these kinds of strategies and seen real gains in both staffing and student growth, according to the report. Overall, and I'll end with this, teacher pay is the single largest line item in every district's budget, and it should be. Teachers matter more than any other school-delivered input for student learning. But a lot of districts are facing big budget shortfalls, and if they are going to spend their scarce resources on teacher compensation, they should probably be spending it in ways that actually help the students learn.
Amen, Adam. Absolutely. And like we talked about with Jonathan, the trick is how do you get these things through the local politics? If you just make it about the money, that maybe is a harder sell. You've got to make it about something more strategic and something more exciting and promising, right? So in other words, we say, look, we really want to move to this better pay system. For most teachers, it's going to mean more money in your pocket, for example. I mean, if you can figure out a transition that, basically nobody loses or very few people lose, maybe you can get it done. Or maybe the message is, look, if you're at the very top of the pay scale right now, like in Santa Ana, that's going to be hard to keep those teachers, kind of hold them harmless. But maybe you say, look, you can keep that salary, but only if you go teach in the highest need school. And we're going to build a system that's going forward is much more fair and much more equitable. I would love to see it. It is depressing that it happens so infrequently, but the fact that it does happen in a few places, it happened in Charlotte, of course, a place where collective bargaining is not allowed, with North Carolina. That's interesting. Did she say anything? She mentioned 15 states that require it. Do any states prohibit it? Have we seen anybody go to that step as far as you know?
Prohibiting it from the state level. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And it's confusing. Why would it be in the South, these red states, that would actually require it? I mean, I guess maybe that's because they do have these, in some of those states, they have these statewide salary schedules that are these minimum schedules. Maybe that's what's going on there.
Well, they say that in New York and Connecticut, you can't even get your complete certification without having a master's degree. You have some kind of provisional or lower level certification.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, the reason we think this doesn't show up in learning is that the master's degree could be in anything, right? I mean, most of the time it doesn't matter. Like they just, whatever they're interested in, it doesn't have to have any relationship to the subject they're teaching, or it's not like, oh, I'm going to go get intensive master's degree in how to teach reading to kids with disabilities. You would think something like that might show up in getting better outcomes, right? It's just random.
I think in most cases that's right.
Yeah, it's just random. And I had heard once, I don't know if this is one of these myths, like, when people used to think that we have summer break because of the agricultural schedule, which doesn't make any sense at all, right? But I remember hearing that once upon a time, the idea with master's degree pay bumps was that it was mostly high school teachers that had master's degrees, and those high school teachers were mostly men. And so this was basically a way to pay male teachers more than female teachers. Again, maybe I'm just passing on a myth. Maybe somebody out there can tell me if this is true, if I'm remembering that right. So, like, okay, that's even a weird way to think about how this might have started, was that this was a way of legalizing pay discrimination. The bottom line here, though, Adam, is that we do know that if you pay teachers significantly more money, like it's got to be a lot, like $10,000 or $20,000 a year more to teach at a high need school, you can get great people to do it, right? And that is the piece that is just not happening in very many places. I mean, it happened in Dallas. It's now happening in Houston. We can look at DC, maybe a couple other places. Austin, I think there's talk about it. But that's where we need to shift this discussion. I mean, look, I'm saying this as a guy in the center right. I mean, this is a huge equity play, would be way better. But how can is there any way to convince the teachers unions to get behind that as opposed to the master's degree thing?
Well, I think it's really difficult because, I mean, you mentioned Dallas and DC and Houston. I think in most of those places, it's also conditioned on performance, which I think is best. But then how you measure performance is so complicated. We've got test scores in certain grades. Lots of teachers don't teach a tested subject. And so it becomes really difficult to evaluate performance in a way that is credible to the public and is also, valid and incentivizes the right stuff. And I don't know, I've talked to some people about this, and it's just, I'm looking for that model that just gets everybody bought in and does what we want it to do, and nobody runs away from. Because in some cases, like in Dallas, I think as soon as the leadership left, it kind of reverted back to some of their old ways. But what do you think about the right place to do this intervention, Mike? Is it better to do this at the district level, or is it better to do it at the state level? I get really concerned about just the state handing out money to districts, because then I think maybe the districts are just going to substitute it and not actually end up paying the teachers more. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I've talked to Marguerite Rosa about the idea of doing it at the state level, and it is appealing in that you wouldn't make it subject to bargaining, which again can capture a lot of this stuff, and then it disappears. But you would need to figure out some smart way, like you say, to keep a maintenance of effort provision for the districts so that it's really additive. I do think for red states, gosh, I think about Republican governors who are all fired up about how frustrated they are with colleges, so-called woke colleges. I mean, the master's degree bump is benefiting, yes, it's benefiting teachers. It's hugely benefiting universities, right? Probably in the largest cases, ed schools. So I would think you could definitely have a state policy to prohibit it, saying it. I mean, first of all, I would love for them to say, you know what, you can't have a single salary schedule. You've got to have something that has these other features. If you're not willing to do that, at least say, hey, you cannot have this provision of paying teachers more for master's degree. If you want to pay some teachers more, it's got to be either on performance, or it's got to be based on serving in hard to staff schools or hard to staff areas. End of story. And that could be picking a fight with the universities, which Republican governors like to do. What are you waiting for? Let's see it. All right, Adam. Well, hey, That was good, a good one. I appreciate it. And a good reminder that a solid policy study, descriptive study can be important to the conversation. We don't always have to just look for those crazy, NBER empirical studies to guide our way.
Yeah, and foundations out there. Remember that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you happen to know a think tank that sometimes does studies like that? All right, Adam, that is all the time we've got for this week. So until next week,
I'm Adam Tyner.
And I'm Mike Petrilli at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute saying go blue and signing off.
The Education Gadfly Show is a production of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, located in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit us online at fordhaminstitute.org.